Breakfast for dinner. That is the plan here today. Pat's Interference, now brought to you by PrizePicks. Recording Friday, March 8th, couple of days away from free agency. And by breakfast, I mean mailbag. Typically reserved for the end of these episodes, but today instead we start with Jordan, who had this question via Twitter. Quote, with the Patriots having to go quarterback, tackle, wide receiver in the first 3 rounds of the draft, doesn't that make signing a starting free safety and tight end in free agency a must? Well, good news for you, Jordan, who asked this question on Thursday, as I continue to push. If you want to come on the podcast, you want to join, ask a question, and make a donation to Boston Children's Hospital, we have Joe Ascioti on today at the end of this episode after Brian S. last week. Thank you to everyone who donated. I have good news for you. Hunter Henry, this morning, agreed to a 3-year, $27 million contract, upwards of $30 million, including incentives. $16 million of that is guaranteed. All of that information, courtesy of my colleague Doug Kide, everyone's fan favorite here on the podcast. Good piece of business. Secondarily, as you've definitely heard by now, Kyle Duggar was slapped with the transition tag. 1 year, $13.8 million. Let's put Duggar to the side for a second, because Hunter Henry's deal is the rare deal that exceeds projections you would not find anywhere. Not here, not talking to people around the league, PFF. You go, hey, what's Hunter Henry going to get? And here are these numbers. And yet, I like it for the Patriots. Not because I'm sort of honk on here. We can go back and listen to all of the episodes last season, criticizing them for this and that and the other thing. But here's how it went down with Hunter Henry. He came back because he was the best tight end available. He came back because the Patriots have only one tight end under contract. That's LaMichael Petway, who might not even play a snap for the Patriots this season. And he came back because he had leverage and the Patriots had cash to spend. So when you throw that all together, after Dalton Schultz goes back to the Texans for more money and sets the market for everyone else below him, which included Hunter Henry, this deal feels to me, so long as Henry wanted to come back, inevitable. And I think that's fine, because Hunter Henry, in addition to filling a major need right away as the best player available, which is good business no matter what you're doing, was a captain last year. He's a locker room leader. He's a stabilizing force there, not only just amid other players on the team, but for the quarterback, right? Like Hunter Henry is not putting up 1,000-yard season. We all know this. What he is, however, is getting open on 3rd and 5, running a stick route. He's going to run those corners to the back end of the end zone. He's going to score 2 touchdowns with Bailey Zappi in Pittsburgh, as we saw last year, and get between 600 and 700 yards, being a reliable option for a young, inexperienced quarterback. And whomever the Patriots sign or draft or don't, that's who's going to be playing quarterback for them next season. A young quarterback and an inexperienced one. And Hunter Henry has what you'll hear me call and use later, residual impact and effect with this contract. It's not just going to be about his numbers and what he does in a vacuum. It's what he's going to do for the locker room, for the quarterback, and all of that adds up to me in a deal that's actually really just going to be 2 years based on the guarantees as a very good market. Not to mention, you want to talk about numbers if you're upset about the deal? Hunter Henry had 42 catches for 419 yards and 6 touchdowns last season. 14 games. All right? Again, granted, not great. I would argue to you that those numbers are not representative of the player he still is, even in the, we'll just say he crested over his prime right now. He's in the back end, the backside of his prime. Because when you look at the first 2 games in the season, the only games in which the Patriots really got steady above average quarterback play, except for maybe that Pittsburgh game from Bailey Zappi, a lot of jump balls, we talked about it. Hunter Henry had 11 catches for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns versus the Eagles and Dolphins. Prorated, that season-long stat line, granted from just 2 games, would get him into the Pro Bowl. Do I think Hunter Henry is a Pro Bowl player? No, of course not. But he's come close, and I think that is the player he still is today. So you want to complain about the numbers and lack of production, I would give you Exhibit A, Mac Jones, and Exhibit B, Bailey Zappi. And it's probably not going to be either one of those quarterbacks going forward. But the next quarterback is going to benefit in more ways than one from number 85, who the Patriots just re-signed. This is a good bit of business. Now, on to Kyle Duggar. Again, 1 year, $13.8 million. No compensation if Kyle Duggar, who can receive offers and negotiate with other teams, signs a deal and the Patriots elect not to match. They have the right of first refusal. You want to offer him a 3-year, $45 million? Sounds good to us. We'll take that deal, sign it ourselves, give it to Kyle, and he's staying. That's how this works. Kyle's camp, as I understand it, was not thrilled about the transition tag. Number one, because it kind of curbed his market. Yes, teams can still negotiate with a guy who has a transition tag on it and not have to surrender any compensation. Good for them. But what they have to do now is work from a floor that maybe they didn't want to before. And that floor is set by $13.8 million, which is the figure for safeties who receive the transition tag, which is the average of the top 10 salaries paid to safeties right now. And you do this for every position. It's higher, obviously, for quarterback, edge rushers, corners, but for safeties, it's $13.8 million. And Kyle knows his value is somewhere between $12 and $16 million per year. But teams now have to not only probably move up their numbers, they have to figure out a deal they don't think the Patriots will match. Because if you're going to go through all of this negotiation and preparation right into the contract, don't you want the player at the end? Yeah, obviously. And if they think the Patriots are willing to go up to, let's say they offer him a deal that's average of $15 million, 3 for 45. Well, then you've just wasted your time for a player that you probably weren't going to keep because the Patriots lead the league in cap space and obviously value this player. The difference is they disagree with Kyle on where that market is. I don't know exactly where it is. But what this tag is first of all, not useless. And yet another example, as I argued with Mike Felger on TV the other night, of if you want to know the nitty gritty of the league, stop listening to talk radio. Find podcasts, find articles, find people smarter than me that can walk you through this. What I will tell you, though, is while it is not useless, it is a bet by the Patriots that says we know the safety market better than you do. And we're going to prove it to you because we'll give you $13.8 million guaranteed in this 1-year deal, which you don't like because by the time this ends, if you stay, you'll be 28. Your market will be lower. Okay. And you'll play here because this is the best deal you're going to get. And maybe they're wrong, but I think it's a wise bet given what we already talked about. 13.8 pretty much splits the difference between the $12 and $16 million annually that I know Kyle's camp envisioned as what his range was going to be in this market. Okay. And because it's guaranteed, that's harder for teams to sign up for. Now, if a team really, really likes Kyle Duggar, the best way to go about pulling him out of New England would just be, okay, we'll give you a 1-year deal. That's $16 million. Because then the Patriots are put in an awkward position of like, okay, do we match this now? And granted, it's just a couple more $1 million. But if you do it, you know you have an unhappy player who can point to the team that offered him that contract and said, they valued me at 16 because that's what they offered me the first time and you offered me less. So again, it's a sticky situation, but the word to know the dynamic of this whole position tag is that it's a bet by the team. So yeah, it didn't sit well with Kyle, but I will tell you this. It might be sitting better now than when it first happened on Tuesday or Wednesday because the safety market has since been flooded with new veterans. Justin Simmons, Jordan Poyer, plenty of other players that I think if you're interested in Kyle Duggar, who's younger than those guys, right? But has not made a Pro Bowl like they have, hasn't been in a conversation for all pro like Simmons has, who also leads the league in interceptions since 2016. You're probably willing to sign those players to a shorter term deal for probably comparable money and bank on their production from a playmaking standpoint. That's been the last step, especially in coverage for Kyle, that he really hasn't made consistently. So all of those safeties hitting the market are collectively going to depress each of their salaries for wherever they end next. Because if you don't want to meet Justin Simmons' price of $16 million, okay, we'll just give 12 to Jordan Poyer and call it a day. So everyone comes down. There's more supply, okay? That gives more leverage to the teams than it does the players who are out there in the market, specifically with all these safeties. And there are plenty more than I listed from Poyer and Simmons, but you get the point. $13.8 million on an average annual basis, while expected to be right in line with Kyle's market, might actually now be on the high end because of how many other options teams have if they're in the safety market. But the Patriots have already committed themselves to him. And that's where things stand. A couple other things, and then we'll get to Aaron Schatz, who was awesome. First time having him on the podcast. He's going to be back. We swapped free agent wish lists. We surprised each other. Actually, we had one player in common, and then the player at the top of each of our lists plays the same position, but was different. Before that, two things. Mack Wilson and Pharaoh Brown. This has been reported elsewhere. I can confirm it. Heard it at the combine. Followed up since. Patriots are close there. And I wouldn't guarantee a deal gets done. But I think in terms of where those players' roles are, what they mean to the team, the value that they're going to find in the market, I would not be surprised if they come back soon on short-term deals. Mike Evans, this is now going back a week ago. He was always going back to Tampa Bay, re-signed with the Buccaneers. It's 2 years, over $20 million. But if for whatever reason he had a change of heart and wanted to hit the open market, I know for a fact the Patriots were prepared to make a significant offer to Mike Evans, which is not to crown them the new kings of interest in Boston. The Red Sox have that crown. They're not giving it up. And everyone gets frustrated hearing about, oh, Mike Evans, they had interest. They had interest in that guy. It doesn't ultimately add to anything. I get that. I know it. I'm telling you that right now. But what I will tell you is that peak into those negotiations where the Patriots were prepared to make a competitive offer, a very strong offer as it was put to me for Mike Evans, gives you insight into what Elliott Wolf is thinking, not only just from a financial standpoint, but from what he values from a positional perspective. They need a receiver. We've all been screaming about this for 5-6 years in the media. A number one, he's got gravity. He's a threat. He draws the defense to him. Mike Evans is that guy. Were they ever probably getting him? No. Even if he did hit the open market, of course he's going to go to a contender, chase another ring, play for probably a better quarterback. But the Patriots are going to be aggressive in that market. Again, it doesn't guarantee anything, but even approaching Mike Evans with that type of deal, something close to or maybe over what he eventually got, is something that never, ever, ever, ever would have happened under Belichick, for better or for worse, because that's not how they spent at the position. But the Patriots now are doing business in a very different way than they did before, and we'll see what it leads to next week. Last thing, and then we'll get to Aaron Schatz. Plus, Joe Ascioti in the back end with the mailbag question. We got to get more ratings. We got to get more reviews. You guys answered in a big way when I asked you about this over a month ago. Supremely appreciated. It extends our reach on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify. I need you to do me a favor. I need you to do this again. If you have enjoyed our content, okay, support the people that support us. That's PrizePicks. I've been on there multiple times this week. It's a great site. Number 2, hit 5 stars. Leave us a note. You've heard me say this before. I will take the good commentary with the bad, whatever it is that's a top of mind for you about how we're doing things here in the podcast, things we could do better. Let me know. Rate, review, subscribe, and that includes my new personal YouTube channel. So take a second. You're about to take a full hour listening more of this podcast. If you have 2 minutes, do any one of those things, and it will be supremely, supremely appreciated as we grow here, coming up on the 2-year anniversary of this podcast. Okay, without further ado, Aaron Schatz, formerly of Football Outsiders, now at FTN Fantasy, the godfather of football analytics, on his Patriots wish list, and much, much more, plus mailbag on the back end. It's a new era, not just for the Patriots, but for the Pats Interference Podcast, brought to you now by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in America. I'm making player picks, watching the Celtics, points, rebounds, and I get to test my skills like you can on PrizePicks this season because it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. And then here's the best part: quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types, which all make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app, plus a review policy, which means you get your money back in case of injury, the only DFS platform to offer an insurance policy. Again, PrizePicks has been a ton of fun with the Celtics. You can also go with the Bruins, any number of different sports, games, players, plays, and options. So right now, go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Okay, Aaron Schatz, formerly of Football Outsiders, now at FTN Fantasy. You can read him at ESPN. The godfather, perhaps just the father of DVOA, is with us for the first time. It would have been a heater, I think, personally, of having guests. Evan McCourty, followed by Aaron. Aaron, of all the titles I just listed off, which is your favorite?
Godfather of football analytics sounds good. I get that sometimes. That's pretty good.
Oh, okay. So next time we'll have you on. That's how I lead you off. It's not just Godfather of DVOA. It's all of football analytics, at least certainly in the public discourse, I would say. That's
yeah, there were people doing it before me, but they weren't very public. I sort of started in the early days of the internet, and the internet makes it a lot easier to get your ideas out to people than, before the internet existed.
Right. It's funny because I think a lot of people, when it comes to analytics, the first person that they hear of in sports is kind of the pioneer, which you absolutely are, is Bill James. I've never asked you this. Do you know Bill? Have you spoken with him at all?
I've spoken to him a couple of times back at past Sloan conferences, the early days of the Sloan Analytics Conference, but I grew up reading him. So, there's no question I've patterned my career after Bill James. And he's a hero for a lot of people. So, yeah.
Absolutely. If you don't know Bill James, we don't have enough time in this podcast for everything he did for baseball. But look, if you're looking for Aaron Schatz 20 years before Aaron started, that's exactly who he was and what he did for the whole industry. Now, today we are doing something a lot simpler, more straightforward. Every man today. We have a list, which is very common to the sports talk arena here. 4 Patriots free agents you would like them to target if you were running the front office. The Patriots still have the league leading amount of cap space. It's under 100 million after they re-signed Hunter Henry here today. We'll put that to the side for now because I want to ask you questions that I can really only ask you as far as guests get on here. And so when we talk about the new Patriots, Elliott Wolf, de facto GM, Jerod Mayo as the head coach, I'm looking at this going, okay, they want to keep the foundation of what the Patriots did, but obviously evolve what Belichick had been doing. And there's been a lot of talk about relationships and connection with players. I think that's all well-founded. From your perspective, though, because you've written about Belichick's conservatism on fourth down, I want to know what other low-hanging fruit there might be analytically that we can point to and measure and say they can do this and give themselves an advantage right away that they weren't the last few years.
I mean, I don't know. There are a couple of analytics people in the front office. I don't know exactly what they work on, and I don't know how much they're listed to. I mean, I'd love to see more analytics people in the front office, and I'd love to hear that they're being listened to about things on a regular basis. The easiest low-hanging fruit is fourth downs. Even if your offense is bad in the modern NFL, it usually makes sense to go for it on 4th and 1. Obviously every situation is different, but Belichick, it's very strange. Belichick for a long time was one of the most aggressive coaches in the league on fourth downs. And sometime in 2012, that changed. And for the last few years, he's been one of the most conservative coaches, making mistakes, kicking the ball away constantly on 4th and short. And it's weird because people think maybe that it ties into the 4th and 2 against the Colts. But that was 2009. And yet he continued to be aggressive after that until 2012. And then there's no easy to understand event that ties to. But I would love to see Mayo be more aggressive on fourth downs than Belichick was, because I mean, yes, it's probably not going to be a great offense this year, even with a rookie quarterback. Rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle, but still, you're going to make those 4th and 1s and 4th and 2s pretty often, and it makes a lot more sense to keep the ball than turn it over. Other things, the way that they look at the draft, Belichick always was very analytically sound on trading down. Right, because analytics generally says trading down is almost always the right thing to do. Trading up is usually a mistake unless you're doing it for a quarterback. But also, I mean, what positions that they go after, the idea of positional importance, that certain positions are more important than other positions, and that certain positions are easier to find the stars in the draft. The most important positions, you're more likely to find your stars in the draft. Wide receiver, cornerback, offensive tackle, edge rusher. Your other positions, you're more likely to find your useful players in free agency. Free agency is where you go after your off-ball linebackers, where you go after safeties. This year especially, there's tons of safeties. So I think if they're smarter about sort of positional importance and how they understand positional scarcity in the league, that's also low-hanging fruit.
I like that too, because I read somewhere this week as far as and the analytics discourse, right, is so broad, right? Like we should speak specifically whether it's fourth down decision making, positional valuing, spending, all these specific to roster building because we're in the offseason here. I had read that it's better to abide by some macro roster building philosophies rather than devote all of your time and resources to, breaking down the third down snaps against Kent State for this draft prospect, right? Like you're more likely to have a good draft if you do, as you said, prioritize premium positions as opposed to get into the nitty gritty, which there are examples back and forth. Christian Gonzalez last year, cornerback, premium position. Cole Strange the year before, not a premium position. Do you buy into that sense that you can, as an NFL front office, largely get the draft right if you focus on the more valuable positions, understanding that the return on the investment for a corner, quarterback, receiver, left tackle is going to be so much higher, especially on these cost-controlled rookie contracts?
Yeah, because the strongest thing about the draft is You do not know as much as you think you know. Like, that is the strongest truth about the draft. There have been some research projects that suggest that nobody is any better than anybody else at drafting over the long run. Now, I don't think that's true. I do think that you look at certain GMs and they do have a good draft record over the long run, slightly better. But even if there are differences between GMs, those differences are a lot less than we think they are. There's a lot more luck than we think there is in the draft. So, for example, trading up, you have a guy rated a certain way on your scouting board and you trade up to get him, and you give up more draft capital because you think this player is specifically good, but you don't know. That's the problem. We are not good at scouting football players. So you're more likely to get a useful player out of the 2 or 3 lower picks than you are out of the higher pick, even though you're more likely to get a useful player out of the higher pick than you are out of one of the lower picks, right? Like, it's still generally true that overall, the better your draft pick, the better the players you're going to get. But you want as many shots at the lottery as possible.
Right. And the exception that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, right, was the quarterback. If you're trading up, it better be for the most important position, arguably.
Right. And we still don't know, right? Like, we're
right.
all sitting here going Drake May and Jaden Daniels. And we, even me, I have a projection system for quarterbacks. It's not very good. Like, we don't know how good those guys are going to be, but we know that if one of them hits, it's so important that, yes, that's the one position you trade up for, is for quarterback. And that's why, as much as Marvin Harrison looks so good, I really do not want to see them pass on a quarterback with the 3rd overall pick. You do not get a chance to take a quarterback in the top 3 very often. You got to go for it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. We won't spend too much time there, but just to back up these ideas, right? Because it's easy to talk about in the theoretical. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, right? The dynasty that they're enjoying now started with trading up for Patrick Mahomes, making that big deal in, I think, 2017. He sits a year, 2018 takes off. Since then, they spent first-round picks in the Cole Strange draft. Trent McDuffie, cornerback. George Karlaftis, edge rusher. Like, they're abiding by this macro philosophy of, okay, the exception is going to be the quarterback. Every other first-round pick, and there are exceptions, are going to be on the big positions, because if you're investing those many resources or that kind of capital, you want to get that return where there's just going to be a ceiling on Cole Strange as a left guard. Not to belabor the point, but what's something that you hear too, because I ask this of coaches and scouts all the time, a popular media misconception, or a fan misconception about, we can just go broadly about football or roster building, that you hear and go, that is so analytically unsound. If I could snap my fingers, no one would ever say this again.
The first one I would say is the cap is meaningless.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, no disrespect to Michael Felger.
I was going to say, I want to phone Felger in right now. Give me a second. We'll make this a 3-way call. We'll boot him out of here in 2 minutes.
Let's see what Michael Felger would think about the cap being meaningless if, instead of being on 98.5, he was on New Orleans Sports Hub Radio, where that team is going to go 8-9 in perpetuity because they constantly keep kicking salary cap money down the road. And they extended Derek Carr because it was the only way to get under the cap, which means now they're stuck with a mediocre quarterback for the next 3 to 4 years. Like, I mean, it's not that New Orleans is going to go 3-14, because they'll go out and they'll sign a couple of players and they'll move the money down the line, and they'll, but you can't build a winner there until you take your medicine. So that's the first thing. The other is, I just think for fans in general, even though in the analytics community we harp on the issues about running backs, I still feel like running backs are really overrated by general fans because of the fact that they have fantasy football value, and because back in the day they were more important than they are today. And there's this feeling like, look at all the great running backs in the free agent market this year. There's Josh Jacobs, and there's Saquon Barkley, and there's Tony Pollard. And the reason why they're all going to be out there is because they're not really worth that much, between the fact that people tend to judge running backs on total yardage when they should be looking at efficiency. Dalvin Cook is a good example. People were like, the Jets signed Dalvin Cook. He had 1,000 yards last year. He was not good 2 years ago. Like when the Jets signed him, we were like, this running back is not good anymore. They age incredibly quickly. Like the offensive line is much more important to the running game usually than the running back is. And I feel bad saying this. There's this feeling among some people that analytics folks are trying to keep the running back salaries down, like we're anti-labor. But it's just a question of who gets paid. It's not that we don't think football players should get paid. It's just we think offensive linemen should be paid more. The analytics people did not create the salary cap. The players and the owners negotiated that. Like in my world, it would be more fair for players if there was no salary cap, but that's not my fault.
Right. And the famously bourgeois analytics folks making millions of dollars sitting here trying to curb, the income of everyone else. Like, come on, get real. And I'm with you. It's not about, you keeping that down. It's just the reality of the market. And the NFL has shown that to you.
And it's just the reality of the game. And the other thing, here's the thing, right? The lower you go down in football levels, certain things change. And among the things that change is the running backs and the running game become more important as you go down in levels. So just because we talk about how in the NFL running backs are fairly replaceable and they age super quickly and whatever, is not making a statement about your local high school team. Like, if Sharon High had a great running back, they'd freaking go 8-1 or something because running backs are so important in high school, but it's a different game than college, and college is a different game than the pros.
Yeah, and it's, Josh Hirschmeyer of 538, I remember wrote this around the time of the last Pats-Rams Super Bowl. And I had known and agreed with, even at that time, 2018, 2019, that the analytics folks leaning, hey, running backs don't matter as much as you think. He was saying it matters about offensive line play and the defensive box count. And the easier way to think about this, as far as, projecting what a running back will get, is to say, okay, if you have 16 to 17, sometimes 18 human beings, right, accounting for offense and defense involved in the same project, right? How much influence can a single person, even maybe the one holding the ball, giving the presentation, exert influence on the outcome or the quality of whatever that project or play will be relative to the other 16, 17 people in the project or the presentation or the running play? Like, of course, the majority of other people not holding the ball or the clicker or the microphone are going to determine what happens in that instance or play or project much more than the one person. I think that's a better way to think about it. Not to mention when, Saquon, who I think is obviously a great player, that's not a hot take, but his value to me is not even holding the ball in those plays. It's what can you do as a receiver? What can you create on your own?
Yes. McCaffrey, that's what makes McCaffrey special, right? McCaffrey is a special, right? He's sort of the exception to the running backs don't matter idea. And the main reason for that is his receiving ability.
Yeah, poor Ben Baldwin. I want to see Christian McCaffrey in like a T-shirt just with Ben's site, RBS, DM, running backs don't matter. Look at me, Christian McCaffrey, because it is interesting. And I don't want to belabor this point too much because we're going to get hyper specific with the Patriots here in a second. Well, in the discourse about this team, stuff maybe even I said that you hear and kind of cringe from an analytic perspective, but there are analytics-friendly front offices, Eagles, Browns, that have prioritized running back in a way that's really paid off for them. Now, the starting point there, I think, is they both have great offensive lines. But
Chubb also, Nick Chubb does particularly well in the analytics that we do have that try to separate the running back from the offensive line, like the next gen stats, running yards over average, like expectation. Like Chubb is really good, really, really good in that stuff. Like if there's any running back in the league who does matter on the ground, Chubb is probably the first one on the list.
Yeah, right. And it's, breaking tackles, again, creating on your own, or Saquon's conversation, because he's rumored maybe to the Eagles. And if he signs in New England, I'm not going to poo-poo signing a guy who's still just 26, the guy who I covered at Penn State. And to be honest, Aaron, has not run behind a functional offensive line since he was in high school, where obviously he dominated in Eastern Pennsylvania. I just want the guy to get a little bit of a break. Probably won't come in New England, but Philly, he might. So, and again, that's your ability to create on your own, like Chubb, or receive like Barkley or McCaffrey, any of these guys. Like the exceptions to the rule need one or both of those elements. But within the Patriots, what have you heard lately about the team, maybe just football, plans of free agency, the draft, that you go, this isn't sound when I look at my models and numbers?
Mac Jones really was really good as a rookie. I think that's the biggest misconception about the Patriots is the idea that Mac Jones has been terrible all along. He really was really good as a rookie. One of the top dozen rookie quarterback seasons in value in the last 40 years. I don't know what happened. There's nothing.
How much
like
time do you have? I don't have my watch
There's
up, but
nothing
spend
like
another
it
whole
in
episode.
football. There's nothing like it in football history. There's never been a quarterback who was that good as a rookie who fell apart in such a ridiculous fashion without there being injuries involved. So because he's sort of a 1 in a million ridiculous like decline, people tend to be like, well, he was never really that good. And look at that Buffalo game in the wind where they only let him throw 3 times. And look at the Jacksonville game 3 weeks after that. Like Cleveland was not a bad defense that year. And Jones just completely destroyed them. Like he was pretty good as a rookie. And we were all sitting there. I remember people debating Jones versus Trevor Lawrence because Lawrence had struggled so much as a rookie. And I thought that was a bit ridiculous because we all knew Lawrence had so much talent and was so, created such a bad situation for him with Urban Meyer. But at the same time, the fact that people were even having that debate, like, I think we tend to look back at the past through the mirror of the last couple of years and go, well, he was never that good to begin with. I don't know what happened to him. But I mean, obviously, there's a lot about the coaching and there's a lot about psychology, player psychology in here. And I'm not a very good psychologist, but he really was pretty good as a rookie. That is, I think, the biggest misconception about the Patriots is that he's been bad all along.
Yeah, it's a good point. And look, I'm someone who's on the record and was in mid-October, saying I'm out. I'm done with Mac Jones.
I'm out too.
Right.
What I just said does not mean I'm in. I'm totally out.
Right, but it is interesting because I think you'll have teams that go back in a very similar way. That right now the conversation about Drake May is he suddenly falling back, and if you look at the tape, it wasn't that good, and he's taking sacks and making risks and all these different things. People I talked to at the combine said the 2022 tape for Drake May is much more valuable. Now, that's an easier leap to make, understanding, and the reason they say that is the offense,
teammates,
right? The circumstances. It's another year, if you're talking about Mac Jones, to go backwards to 2021. Like the further that data point is away from us, the less relevant it is to today. But there are teams that will go, okay, he was really good, as you just said, in 21, had flashes in 22. And I look at a team like the Vikings, who saw him in person Thanksgiving night in their house going, he almost threw for 400 against us. Granted, our defense stunk back then, but as a team that goes, if we're going to take a young quarterback, he's a perfect bridge. And maybe he pays off in a way that we can win with him in a quarterback-friendly offense with Kevin O'Connell and that Shanahan-esque system.
Good luck with that. Yep.
I agree. But you got to make the case. He was very good. It was a long time ago. Moving on. Last thing before we get to the wish list. Setting aside the obvious, franchise quarterback, improve the receiving core, boost the offensive line. A successful Patriots offseason, in Aaron Schatz's opinion, will include blank.
The obvious. I thought about this because you sent me some questions, and I thought about this, and I don't know what it includes besides the obvious.
Okay.
Right? Like the obvious is, the most important thing for this team is to fix the quarterback situation. And the second most important thing is the offensive line situation. I actually think the receiver situation is a little bit harder to deal with because they've got a good collection of 2s and 3s, right? If Smith-Schuster can be healthy, and if they re-sign Kendrick Bourne and he seems to want to be here, it's a reasonable collection of 2s and 3s. You can't really upgrade those guys that much because there's only one guy available who might be a one wide receiver, and that's Calvin Ridley, and I don't think he's coming here. All the other receivers are available. Like, how much of an upgrade on Devontae Parker is Gabriel Davis? Is he worth giving a lot of money to? Like, I don't know how much they can upgrade the receivers, but the offensive line and the quarterback, like those situations have got to be improved.
So I would just include this because it's the flip side, right? Of you need to boost your pass offense, such as how you win in the modern league, is to enhance either through re-signing or perhaps trading for or drafting players at corner and edge rusher. Because Matt Judon's going to come back. I think he's still in the back end of his prime right now.
Oh, yeah. You always need young players at those positions, and they could definitely use, and free agents. We'll get to free agents, but that edge rusher would be a good place to add a free agent too.
And it's a sneaky need, right? Like when we talk about fantasy football, there are no more sleepers anymore. There's too much data. There's too much information, too much discourse. The industry is too large to be like, this is a guy no one has written about, no one has talked, no one has thought about. I'm going to grab him in the 15th round. That's how I feel about the needs for a football team. We've been talking about this for weeks and months. We started mid-season last year going, what's the offseason going to look like? Because this sucks right now. We all wanted to escape and run to where we are in this moment. And so I would just add that corner and edge rusher, other people have spoken about, but still can get lost in the greater discourse. Like I'm doing TV tonight. We're not going to talk about anything with the edge rusher market, but it would behoove the Patriots to enhance those positions, add to them, as it would every team, every year, especially a team that appears to have such a low ceiling going into next year. Like amplify your strengths in a way that doesn't, at least lets that defense maintain where it is.
And build for the future. So you've got young talent around at the most important positions. If you hit on the quarterback, so you've got all the talent around him and the defense and everything's good.
Yeah. Okay. On to free agency. You have 4 players. I have my 4 players. I don't know who you picked on this thing. And I think because of the needs, whether they've been addressed ad nauseum or not, are fairly obvious. But I'm intrigued to see if we have any overlap. So number 4 on Aaron Schatz's Patriots free agent wish list is.
Oh, you want me to go from lowest to highest?
Yes.
Okay. Number 4 is Charles Leno.
Not on my list. Go on.
A stopgap left tackle while a youngster, like I'm assuming they take a quarterback in the first round, right? Which means any offensive tackle they draft is going to be lower. So a stopgap veteran who's not that bad while the young tackle learns to play left tackle. Charles Leno was with Washington last year, I believe. Brandon Thorne, who's a guy I trust very much on offensive line play, has him as the 4th best tackle available.
Wow. That works?
Yeah.
Did Brandon explain why? I mean, I just think a lot of folks listening are
I don't have it in front of me. There were some scouting comments and I forgot to write them down.
That's okay. He's on the list, so whether you're looking at NFL.com.
This is a functional stopgap, reasonable veteran left tackle.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay. I like it. This is not a guy who's going to be a star. But right now they need 2 the guy that they signed from Pittsburgh is not really a starter. Yeah. No. I like that guy. He really stepped up when the Tree of Life synagogue shooting happened. I didn't know that.
So I kind of remember him for that, like very positive publicly for the Pittsburgh Jewish community. But he's not really a starter. So they really need 2 tackles.
Right. And he's been a right tackle for virtually all of his NFL career. Only 2 snaps at left tackle.
Right. So even if he were to start, you'll see when we get to my other free agents.
Right. Very good.
I'm in on the tackles.
So number 4 on my list, and I'll just say in the front end, my list is devoid of like real quote unquote sleepers here, but it's also a stopgap, and it's Jacoby Brissett, because I think as far as bridge quarterback, he knows what he is. He's familiar with New England. He's familiar with the offensive staff in Cleveland. He's a locker room leader.
He had that great season in 2022 with Alex Van Pelt as his coordinator. Yeah.
Except when they played the Patriots, 38-15 is something that got brought up a whole lot when Alex Van Pelt was hired. And, Jacoby was playing from behind a whole lot in that game, had a pick right away. But setting that aside, I think from a mentorship standpoint, someone you're willing to play with as a replacement level quarterback, right? Who has got a little creativity to his game, just checks every box imaginable. Are you going to win more than 7 games if you were to start a whole season? No, of course not, right? He hardly played last year, but in his one start did pretty good in Washington. I just think when you look at the options on the market, there are a lot of warts with this quarterback group. They have no interest in Kirk Cousins. Baker Mayfield's not coming here for anything less than $40 million. That's not going to happen. And I think when you're going to draft a quarterback, this is the guy you want in the room to help him along and to start in case that kid's not ready.
Sounds great to me. I'm all in favor.
All right. Was he on your list?
No. But I wrote about him when I did an ESPN piece on bold moves for every franchise. I suggested, not that I really want them to do this, but that it would be a bold move for them to sign Brissett and take a quarterback later and use that number 3 pick on Harrison. With the idea that Brissett could start for a year while whatever second rounder they took, Michael Penix or whatever, was learning. I still would rather take the quarterback number 3, but if they're not going to take the quarterback number 3, Brissett would be a really good 1-year starter.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I, even if he starts half the season, right? Like there's this whole new push, and I think some folks in media, self-included, we have to fill time, we have to kill time, but some go to extremes while others, stay in the middle lane and just kind of chug along at 72. Are talking about Drake May can't sit. If they take Drake May and he needs to sit for a year, it's a waste of a number 3 pick. The example I gave earlier about how to rebuild properly and invest in premium positions, Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. We're not comparing the players, but the plan can be sound, and you can get enough return on investment, even if he's sitting for one of those 5 initial cost-controlled years on his rookie deal. So if Jacoby Brissett is the guy, you can still sit the quarterback for a year if you think it's in his best interest. Ideally, probably plays half the season, but we're a long ways away from that. Number 3 on your list.
Number 3 on my list is the other tackle, Jonah Williams from the Cincinnati Bengals, to play right tackle. He's a functional average starter at right tackle. Thorne has him as the 3rd best tackle available. The top tackle available is Tyron Smith. I don't think he's coming here. He's ring chasing.
No. Yes.
Number 2, he had Trent Brown. Trent Brown not coming back. So 3, he had Jonah Williams, and 4, he had Charles Leno. And this team needs 2 tackles. There you go, 2 tackles.
Yeah. I like it. Jonah Williams was number 2 on my list, and I like that he, has a first-round pedigree, missed his rookie season in Cincinnati, since then started 3 seasons at left tackle. They flipped him over to right last year because Orlando Brown Jr. came in and said, hey, my contract's bigger. I'm physically better. This is my job now. And Jonah's flexibility is not as appealing to me as his experience at left tackle, because I think, they should still add one in the draft, ideally a developmental prospect. Because whether a core 4 starts or not at right tackle, it's not ideal, but he can be in there in a pinch. So now at least you have 2 veterans where whether you get the better version of a core 4 or not, that rookie has a little bit of time. And you have some depth in a way that you didn't last year when it was just, let's throw Riley Reif at the wall, throw Calvin Anderson up there, and hope that they're Spider-Men in secret, because
we don't even know what Reif, we don't even know how Reif would have played if healthy, because he's older and he got injured and just couldn't get healthy.
Well, we do know he was playing guard by the end of training camp.
Yeah,
that was an issue because he just didn't have the foot speed. But that's old news. Jonah Williams is going to command, as far as projections I've seen, probably in the neighborhood of $14 to $18 million per year. For offensive tackles, given the history of this team, that's completely fine by me. And I would be okay with him starting at left tackle. Again, understanding you're going to have some competition for one of those spots, and ideally that'll include a rookie. Number 3 on my list was Marquise Brown. And talk about warts in the quarterback market. This is the same with the receiver group. And I took a long, hard look at Calvin Ridley, who, spoiler, is not number 1 for me, because now we know my number 2 and 3, Jonah Williams, Marquise Brown. He's only 26. He has a 1,000-yard season on his resume with a run-heavy Ravens offense. Heel and foot injuries obviously hurt him in Arizona, plus some bad timing with Kyler Murray going out. But I look at him, and it's not just the deep speed. It's the ability to play inside and out, some above-average quickness, and there just seems to be a floor here. Like, Marquise Brown will get 650 yards a season if healthy. And there are not many players, frankly, on the market and on the Patriots roster that you can say that about. So whether it's the age, it's the pedigree, it's a skill set, you don't want to build your whole, receiving core out of 5'9" dudes between him and Pop Douglas, but he can play outside in a way that Pop cannot. Draft an X, sign Marquise Brown, probably 1-2-year deal, $12 to $14 million. Sign me up.
I said Ridley was the only number 1 wide receiver on the market. I guess Marquise Brown might be a number 1 wide receiver. We've never seen him really have that super season, but he was kind of the number 1 receiver in Baltimore. So yeah, that makes some sense.
I do. What do you think about this though? Because obviously he gets traded, in that 2022 draft from Baltimore to Arizona. Everyone's like, oh my God, they gave up a 1st-round pick for him. It was Brown and a 3rd for a 1st is what happened there. But they had him there knowing, okay, they probably had to pay him on the 5th-year option coming up in his next contract, coming off that 1,000-yard season, and we're still willing to move on from him. Like, do you think they sold high in that moment, or was that just good business as far as the financials went?
I think they sold medium.
Okay.
I don't think they sold high or low. I think everybody kind of knew Marquise Brown. This is what Marquise Brown is, and I don't think he was really under or overrated at that point. I think he was sort of Arizona knew what he was and Baltimore knew what he was, and this has just worked out for both teams.
Good. Yeah, I think he's a solid number 2. The health question, obviously not great for a 5'9", 180-pound dude. But I remember just watching him in
solid number
college.
2. But if he comes here, he's got to be number 1 because that's the thing. That's what they're missing. They're missing a number 1 guy. Devontae Parker can be number 2.
Yeah, I mean I think I look at this too as not even from a numeric standpoint in the rankings. It's just the body type, right? Like they were overloaded with big slots last year. Juju, Gesicki,
Right.
Kendrick
And they need
Bourne
speed
in there.
speed.
Yeah, you get replace Devontae Parker as your X, ideally Adonai Mitchell, or if you trade back into the first round, there are other guys who might be better than him, big bodied speed, but at least Marquise Brown can play a little bit of Z. Like I think that's where you're not going to solve all your problems immediately, but he's a clear upgrade over whomever they have.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right, number 2 on your list.
Now we're getting into my dreams.
Yeah. All right.
Number 2, because the Patriots do have a lot of money, so they can go after top guys if they want. Jonathan Greenard.
I like this.
Edge rusher, Houston, 27 years old. If this team is going to pay a lot of money for free agents, given that they need to build over the next couple of years, they're not going to pay a lot of money for guys who are 33 years old. They need to get guys who are just coming off their first contracts. Greenard is an excellent edge rusher. Put him opposite Judon. I think that would be fantastic.
Not only that, but Judon's going into the last year of his contract. He's scheduled to only have a base salary of $6 million. I would bet, Aaron, that they remedy that, fix it, adjust it. He does have a void year after that, but they're going to want to do some business with their best player and the entire team. If they do not, however, extend Matt Judon, and I'm not saying they should. I think you should want to see what he looks like coming off of a torn bicep in training camp. Jonathan Greenard could be the player to replace him for the next 3 years after Judon leaves, if he does. So this is a way of just kind of, improving your present while also addressing your future and giving yourself some flexibility where you're not beholden to a 32-year-old edge rusher who's never been a speed player. I think will age pretty well. But also you're not attached to Judon in a way that you would be if you don't sign another edge rusher like Greenard.
Yeah, I really like the idea of bringing in an edge rusher. I was talking about, it's easier to find your top edge rushers in the draft than free agency, but this year is an incredibly good edge rusher class in free agency. There are a lot of good edge rushers out there, and I'd rather have them go after a younger one. And so Greenard is a more complete player than a Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff is everybody's favorite sleeper, but he's not very good against the run. So I'd rather with Greenard.
Yeah, this is like Josh Uche has a poster of Bryce Huff on his wall. That's who I want to be. I'm not going to play an early down, but I'm damn good when it counts on third down, except for Bryce Huff is better. And Josh Uche, again, part of that edge rusher market where, Mark Daniels and Mass Live reported the Patriots have yet to offer Josh Uche. I would say that says a lot about where things stand between the two teams, especially as the Patriots move to re-sign some of their guys and have offered players like Kyle Duggar before they tagged him, Kendrick Bourne, and others. The edge rusher conversation is interesting too, because I think they're going to keep their system in place, right? You're not going to move on, from Belichick and then bring in a new system when you hire a guy who played and coached under him. But Greenard's a guy who last year played in a traditional 4-down system, pin your ears back. And I have not, looked into how well he did dropping or what he can, do moving backwards as opposed to just setting the edge.
Yeah,
but that's going to be a factor here, I think, for them.
The Patriots have a weird defense. Some of the players are kind of hybrid. Sometimes one of the edge rushers is kind of a defensive end while the other one is a linebacker, but they're both edge rushers, but the one guy has his hand on the ground. And I think Greenard would be flexible like that.
Yeah. Okay, so to recap, my list goes from 4, now it's soon to 1. Jacoby Brissett, Marquise Brown, Jonah Williams. You had Charles Leno, Jonah Williams, and then Jonathan Greenard. So number 1 on my list, and I have said this in other places, but not here. And this is a little controversial, and that you're not only signing this player to what will be a top of the market deal, you're giving up draft capital. And according to Mike Giardi, this might not be enough. The Chiefs want a first rounder for L'Jarius Sneed, cornerback, who just turned 27. And I want to hear what you want to say right now. Looking at your face. Give it to me.
Here's the problem, because I'm smiling because my number 1 is also a cornerback.
Oh, okay, good.
Now, here's the problem with cornerbacks. They are very important and very unpredictable. We have not figured out a way to find a good measurement of cornerbacks that correlates strongly from year to year, no matter whether you use charting stats or like the Pro Football Focus grades are less consistent for cornerbacks than any other position, or just anecdotal evidence. And so it makes it very tough to deal with signing corners because corners are super important, but predicting their future is very tough. So the idea of giving up a top pick as well as a huge contract for Snead, as good as Snead is like a little bit of a bridge too far for me. As good as he was last year.
Okay. So I'm going to get into Snead in a second, but I do love that you said, hey, this is probably a bad idea. And this is like midnight and you and I are drinking. And then 5 minutes later, we're going out and doing the bad idea because you have a corner at the top of your list. I have a corner at the top of my list.
But mine doesn't require draft compensation.
Okay. Right. So is it just the pick that stops you here? Like understanding,
it's tough when you saw it is not often a good value to trade for a veteran and sign him to a top of the market contract at the same time.
Okay.
Because you're paying a guy big money and you're giving up the draft capital. And to be worth it, that guy has to live up to that contract. In fact, to be worth that draft capital, he has to exceed that contract in value. I just think of like Jamal Adams, for example, which was a terrible trade for Seattle. And so that's the thing is if they had to give up, and I don't know exactly what the compensation would end up being, but let's say they gave up the pick at the top of the second round and then had to sign Snead to the top of the market contract. It's just too much. It's just too much for me. When there are other cornerbacks available and when cornerbacks are so unpredictable, even though I'm going to recommend a cornerback, the one that I'm recommending wouldn't cost any draft capital.
Okay. Here's the case for me. And I'll be clear. Again, according to Mike Giardi, the Chiefs want a first-round pick. I hang up the phone. I block the number. I call my cell service and say, I want to ensure the Kansas City Chiefs can never call me from this number again. It's a preposterous ask, understanding you're going to sign him to a contract north of $20 million per year. However, if there is a deal on the table where I can massage this in a way, both with the team and from the public messaging, because I think the reaction would be first-round pick, second-round pick, that's crazy. I called Kansas City and said, I will give you a third. And the third is going to be better than any other third that you are going to be offered because we stink. We're at the top of the third round. This is basically like a compensatory second round pick. Okay. That's the first part. To sweeten this, to bump it up to a second round value, I will give you a 2025 fifth round pick, which according to Rich Hill's trade value chart is going to add up again to somewhere in the back end to the middle of the second round. And what I will do in the interim, this is where I hang up, but I don't tell them this part of the plan, is trade Mac Jones for a 2025 fifth round pick because other teams have only listened to the initial part of our conversation about Mac, where he was great in 2021. You are still underrating him. And so I've replenished that pick. Now, you could also just not trade for L'Jarius Snead, add a fifth round pick, and that's good business for Mac Jones. But in this instance, I've essentially given up a third for a proven player who, while his covered stats and the nature of the position might be unstable, has a residual value for the rest of my defense. Because opposite Christian Gonzalez, I don't know because of the position, I will have a top 3, maybe top 5 pairing at corner where we can play man. He can travel on the inside. We've unlocked all of these possibilities from a coverage standpoint. And if I land him, I don't necessarily need to chase Jonathan Greenard because the coverage should be so sticky in the back end. It'll buy more time for that pass rush.
You can also either place Snead on the inside or you can bump Jones. That then bumps Jonathan Jones to the inside. So that's
exactly. And Marcus Jones, God love him. All 5'8" of him. Let's give him a half inch. 5'8.5", Aaron. Does no longer need to stare across from T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on the outside where he did in 2022 because they ran out of outside corners. Jonathan Jones is in the back 9 of his career. I don't want him starting at outside corner for me. I would love to have him as a utility guy playing free safety inside and outside whenever I need him. But if you have a top 4 of Christian Gonzalez, L'Jarius Snead, Jonathan Jones, and Marcus Jones, as I said on TV, set it and forget it. That is going to be one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. And when he goes in his age 27 season to 28 and 29 in his theoretical 3-year, let's call it $63, $65 million deal, I have one of the best pass defenses in the league, or should, in a way that allows me to catch up in year 2 and year 3 with my rookie quarterback and maybe contend even faster.
Now here's the interesting thing about the question of what to do with Jonathan Jones. So my number 1 is a slot cornerback, which would leave Jones on the outside. But I did write down, if you didn't want to go this big at slot, you could go with an outside corner, like, for example, Kendall Fuller, who's the only cornerback who played well in Washington the last 2 years, and then bump Jones to the inside. But my number one is Kenny Moore from Indianapolis.
Wow. Full circle here. Come back, Kenny Moore.
I think the best slot corner in the league, plays great coverage and has been consistent for the last couple of years and is very strong against the run as well, and is still 29. Right? So he's not as young as maybe some of these guys, like a Jeff Okudah who's out there who play outside.
Yeah.
But he is a really good slot corner. And then that would give you a top. That would leave Jones on the outside, but then you'd have Jones and Gonzalez with Kenny Moore as the slot and Marcus Jones as your fourth dude.
Okay. My question, well, first of all, I want to backtrack because I made this big sales pitch and I don't know if I moved your needle at all. Was it at anything I said persuasive? Because I have one more bit to add, but it relates to your Kenny Moore pick.
I as good as Snead was last year, I would rather sign Kendall Fuller for less. If you want to sign an outside cornerback, I'd rather try to get Kendall Fuller for less money and no draft compensation than get Snead for more money and draft compensation. But the idea of cornerback, I'm with. The idea of veteran cornerback, yes.
Okay. So the last part on Snead, which I did not mention, and this is a New England specific issue. They have a small corner room, right? Like the Christian Gonzalez pick was great because he's incredibly sticky in coverage in the 4.5 games that we saw him play football, or the 3.5 games we saw him play football. He's also towering over Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, even Alex Austin to a degree now. Snead is 6'1". He runs 4.3. He started in the slot, can play both outside. You have long physical corners on the outside that gives you better versatility against these bigger receivers where, you know, you just don't have a prayer against anyone 6'1" or taller on these fades with your smaller corners. So that's also something that I like. But the Kendall Fuller point is well taken. On Kenny Moore, I think he's about 5'. Do you know off the top of your head?
No, I don't. But I'm guessing he's a little shorter because most slot corners are.
Right. 5'11". I'm also curious about his system, not fit necessarily, but how much of those stats were part of what's always been a zone-heavy scheme out there in Indianapolis. And it's not to say you can't play zone in New England. Every defense plays more zone than man, to be fair. But the downs that you care about, third down, red zone, you get a lot more man coverage in those situations. And so Kenny Moore...
It's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Yeah, I just wonder about that transition. But as far as the need and kind of the fit here, I'm on board. Did you give any consideration any of those things I just kind of threw at you?
No, I still think Snead is a really good player. I just to trade what would effectively be like the value of a mid-second rounder and then sign him to a top of the market contract. It's a lot. It's a lot. He's really got to live up to it.
I just appreciate that you put it like that. It's a lot because the text I got about an hour before we started, good friend of the podcast, Mike Giardi, was, "Are you high?" Said, good morning to you, Mike. Okay.
When you started talking about the Chiefs and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, he wants to bring in Chris Jones? Like, really?
Yeah, look, if we can convince Chris Jones, hey, we're going to give you a house in Nantucket, you have a lifetime deal with Duncan, and that is going to offset, the $15 million that we won't pay you relative to your other offers. We'll take.
I don't think that's happening.
It's not going to happen. And I don't know why he would leave Kansas City. I don't know why the Chiefs would ever let him out of the building. What he's done in the Super Bowls, the playoff runs, his timeline also just doesn't align with the Patriots. But it's interesting because I think this is more obvious in the NBA, right? The rosters are smaller. People are going, okay, we're going to tank. You need all these young players at the same time. No. The Patriots can get older veterans, good veteran players for this rebuild to guide it in a way, set a new foundation and habits. Like they don't need to go all in all these draft picks. You need a mix of veteran and young players.
Yeah. By the way, I have a cheap guy. I have a cheap guy also that I think is interesting. That's not my top 4. Jerry Jacobs is not going to be. He's a restricted free agent, and he's probably not going to be extended an offer by the Detroit Lions.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Jacobs was above average in coverage in 2022 and very good in the first half of 2023, and then horrifically bad for about 5 weeks, and then he lost his job.
Yeah.
If the coaches could watch the film and figure out what were teams doing differently to attack him in those 5 weeks, or was it just randomness?
Right.
Or was he just this bad all along? If he was just this bad all along, you don't want to sign him. But if you can figure out how to fix him a little bit, that would be a great guy to have as your like fifth corner, who probably would come pretty cheap.
Does he play special teams, Aaron? Because we know if
that's
the
true.
previous regime,
The guy was an undrafted free agent who's been in the league for only 3 years so far. That sounds like a guy who would play special teams.
Yeah, I agree. And if Bill was still here, I think he might already have an offer, or at least backdoor conversations about that. I like that.
By the way, I just ran snap weighted aged this morning because I was updating some stuff, and the Patriots had the oldest special teams in the league again last year. Like, I appreciate that they want to have all these like veteran special teamer guys, but it's not working. Their special teams have been really bad for 2 years, so maybe not have all those guys.
Well, Matthew Slater retired.
Obviously, Slater is retiring, but whatever. Cody Davis or
Chris Board.
There's like 4 of them now, right? There's Schooler, who's younger.
Well, and the rookie kicker and punter, which is amazing unto itself. Like, I started with Slater, but the starting point is the oldest special teams in the league,
despite a rookie
kicking and punting in college less than a year ago. So you're absolutely right. And look, they're going to get a whole lot younger, even from a coaching style. Like, Jeremy Springer is springing off the walls. Was in his press conference. Good dude. We got to chat with him after in this kind of private media coaching staff happy hour. But it will be a new era in New England. Will they be appreciably better? No idea. But I think they will be a bit younger, as you just mentioned. I talked about Hunter Henry in the intro. Do you have any thoughts about just his deal, him coming back here, or any other tangential Patriots free agent thoughts?
He's good. He fits. They need. I was going to maybe suggest a tight end, like the sort of fifth guy. I wrote a fifth guy on my list if Henry left. So I think it's good to have Henry back. I like him. I'm totally good with it.
Yeah, I'm with it too. It was on the high side, but again, you talk about residual value. It's not just what you're doing in a vacuum as these players in those productions, because everything is so interdependent in the sport. But from a locker standpoint, fitting it probably in the new system, leadership, like all these things that he's going to do, in addition to just being a reliable red zone target, he's not going to be a top 10 tight end probably for the rest of his career. But
I don't remember which of the 2 stations was on as I was driving to pick up something at the store this morning, but someone was saying that they thought if Henry had a good quarterback play, he could be an all-pro level tight end. That's not
come on,
not going to happen. But he's a good player. He comes at a reasonable price, and I think it's a good deal.
And look, that's a fine point too. As I again said in the intro, that the numbers he produced were not respective, I think, of the quality of player that he was. They asked him to block in line far more in 2022 because they couldn't block anybody with just their offensive line. And then in 2023, Mac breaks, Bailey Zappi comes in, and it's a bleep show, which we all saw and witnessed. But I thought it was a fine deal. All right, Aaron, what do you have coming up? What can you push? What do you want to sell? What should we look for you from the next?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be off-season content dropping every so often at FTN Fantasy. My page for ftnfantasy.com/DVOA. But the big thing will be the book, right? We do our preseason book, which is now called the FTN Football Almanac, and we'll be doing another one this year, and it'll come out in July, and it'll have all the preview of the season. And so, obviously follow my stuff, follow me on Twitter and Threads, buy the book when it comes out. I'll have my projections for various positions for college players, but that'll be on ESPN Plus over the next few weeks. And old DVOA, that's the other. We love doing fun old seasons. I have 1979 and 1980 ready to go in April. Once free agency calms down, I'm going to run 1979 and 1980 as a fun thing in early April. So that'll be fun.
I love that. That keeps me going in May.
Good Patriots offenses. Good Patriots offenses back when they had like Jackson and Stanley Morgan. And those are good years for the Patriots.
They were.
Then it all crashed out in 81.
Certainly better than the last couple of years. Well, look, you need to read them. I'm citing DVOA left and right. I'm a subscriber to FTN Fantasy. The quality is just as good, if not better, as far as what you got from Football Outsiders back in the day. And whether you play fantasy or not, the information is valuable and shapes your perspective watching these games in a way that the Patriots are going to attack there or be attacked there based on some of the deeper numbers that I can tell you they're looking at in the front office, thanks to work started long ago and continuing today by Aaron Schatz. Thank you very much, Aaron. This was awesome. I would love to have you back, and certainly before the book comes out, because that is, I have my chair, I have my almanac, I have Warren Sharp's book, and usually a beer or two at the beach. That is my second week of July staples right there.
Yeah, we'll try to be out by the second week of July. Last year, with the weirdness of Football Outsiders closing and everything, we didn't get out till August. This year, we'll be out in July like normal.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will be at the beach, and hopefully we'll have you back before then. All right.
All right, sounds good.
All right, as promised, the second edition of Fans, starring on Pat's Interference. We have Joe Ascioti here joining us, and thank you very much, Joe. If you're new to this segment, works like this. You ask a mailbag question, you donate to Boston Children's Hospital. I put all of these names and donations into a fictitious box, pull out a name, and that person gets to appear in the show for 5 to 7 minutes. You were following Brian S. From Saugus last week, who, this segment is cursed. I don't know. Wanted to talk about Kirk Cousins, and then a couple of days later, Doug and I are at the Combine and learned Kirk Cousins is not coming to New England because the Patriots don't want him. So Joe has a different question, but right off the top again, I just want to say thank you.
Happy to support Andrew, and I said this in my email, but what you're doing is really, really impressive and really awesome, and I was happy to be a part of it. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
You got it. Sorry. So Joe asked in his email, which again, if you want to be on the show, 5 to 7 minutes, Joe and I are going to go back and forth. Send a question in via Twitter, via email, screenshot your donation to Boston Children's as little as $1. That's fine. Every single cent counts. And then we'll see if we can get you on the show. We have a couple people backlogged. But in the meantime, let's get to Joe. Joe's asking, quote, at this time next year, what are 3 developments that the Patriots could look back on having achieved during the 2024 season, besides the obvious ones, finding a franchise quarterback and having an above 500 win-loss record that would show they are on the right track? And now this is me editorializing, as Elliott Wolf and Jerod Mayo insisted at the Combine last week. So I have my answers, but Joe, I'm honestly a little bit more interested in you, knowing that you've really thought about this question.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first one for me is that the coaches show that they're the right picks. Jerod Mayo has shown that he can be a in-game manager as well as a off the field kind of coach during the week. Alex Van Pelt shows he can call a game, and there's questions about that. Or the skill position coaches show they can develop skill position talent. So I think just showing that the decisions on the coaching staff were the right ones, or at least directionally the right ones. And then I think another one that I have is that the defense doesn't take a step back. A lot of the people are in place, a lot of the players are in place, but obviously Bill isn't there. So if they can show that this is more of they're able to kind of not even maintain, but even go from a top 5 to a top 10, that we're on the right track. DeMarcus Covington, Mayo are actually going to be able to coach up the defense again. And then the last one I had is just a next generation of leaders emerge for the team. We've had a lot of kind of a pullback of folks in the last couple of years. I know you've talked about that a lot. So, I think those 3 things among a handful of others could probably be the optimists' view at this point next year.
I like it. I think all of those are salient points. They landed for me. And, I think leadership and the defensive side, right, getting the coaching right is going to come up a lot in training camp. We get closer, right? We're going to ask, on the media side in May, okay, who's becoming a voice in the locker room? Is it this new free agent, or is it the rookie quarterback, or how's that developing? Because those are real questions. And I know, speaking with people at the Combine, we wrote this, Doug and I did in our big kind of insider piece. They're looking to bolster the leadership. So it's hard to measure quantitatively, right? But I think the point you make is salient, because when things get tough, right, as they did last year, and that starts to fall back, it's harder to regenerate that momentum, get you through to the end of the season. So is there anyone in mind that you have for the leadership standpoint? Where are you looking for a new player, maybe someone in the locker room to step up?
I think there's a handful of folks. Depends on what happens with Kyle Duggar. I feel like he's someone who, if it works out, and I think you saw recently with the transition tag that number's probably pretty good for what he's going to be looking for. So I think probably higher likelihood that he ends up coming back, fingers crossed. He's someone who could be at the team for another 5, 6, 7 years. I think sticking with safety, Jabril Peppers, I think you've mentioned, is a is quite a presence, and I think that's something that the team needs. On the offense, I think it's going to have to be someone new. Even if it's they bring in a Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco kind of veteran quarterback type, and that helps bridge the gap. But yeah, I think there's a lack of strong voices, at least from the outside on the offense, other than the David Andrews and folks like that.
On the offensive side, I think you're spot on, because David Andrews is someone, he's entering the last year of his contract. And even if he's in the back nine of his career, they want him back. He's a culture driver. He's at least an above average starter there. He'll be back. But around him, the receiver room is where I really want to see some more leadership, right? And I think there's a good chance they bring Kendrick Bourne back. But you have young players in Tyquan Thornton. You have Juju, who's going to kind of do his own thing, not necessarily in a detracting way, right? But you just need someone to get the group together, where I feel like it's immature is strong, but a room that unifies in a way that they haven't had in a long time. And obviously, if the quarterback's in place and they're listening to him and he's playing well, that's the guy to do it. So we'll see. Here are my answers for you, and you grade them on my end. So
Sounds
number
good.
one with a bullet is a signature win, right? How long did we wait for Mac Jones to beat a good team, lead a comeback, maybe even do it on the road when he's not just throwing 3 passes in a windstorm? So that could be the Rams, the Niners, the Bills twice, or maybe the Bengals coming up next season. Number 2 is a 500 record or better after Thanksgiving. And maybe you're more forgiving than I am looking back at last season, but I felt like that didn't really matter much when you're 4-13 overall with Bailey Zappi. And that was the first time, though, since I think it was 2017, 18, they were 500 after Thanksgiving. But you had that kind of record. The Patriots perpetually fell apart, 19, 20, 21, 22, down the stretch. If Jerod Mayo can have them playing their best ball at the end of the season, that shows growth, development, and obviously a team that's got promise for the future, which you can then sell to free agents in 2025. The last one is this: get the explosive play rate up. Okay, this is bottom of the barrel. It was them and the Raiders. Josh McDaniels left. The Raiders climbed back up, and the Patriots were still hanging alone in the basement. They need explosive players to do that. But I think whether it's the acquisitions they make in the coming weeks or the scheme, you just have to get a little bit more dangerous to steal from Baker Mayfield. There's not going to be here, but wake up and feel a little dangerous.
Definitely. I love it. I think they're all spot on. I think for the second one, something I was thinking, it's, even if they win seven games, 6 games, there's multiple ways to win 6 games. And if they start 0 whatever and then win 6 of their last 10, that's great. But if they go, 1 win here, 1 win there, all of that, I think, especially that if they can show momentum going into the offseason, because I don't think anyone, I don't see any way that they can, 500, I think, is a pipe dream, and 5-6 wins is probably, depending on who they end up at quarterback, but, showing momentum, showing growth. Exactly. And then playing their best ball at the end of the year would be a great way to go into the offseason and kind of build off of that.
Definitely. All right, I'll give you one more bonus question because you were so generous here with your time and the donation to Boston Children's. Again, if you want to be on the show, be like Joe, donate, ask a question, email or reply. I just did my free agent wish list with Aaron Schatz, formerly of Football Outsiders, now FTN Fantasy. We listed a bunch of guys, mostly big names. Anyone out there that you could do a tag and trade, which is really just L'Jarius Sneed. Spoiler, that's the guy that I want. That's at the top of your board, or someone that might be that you just really, really covet, even if he's not a top 10, 15, whatever free agent?
I'd say, tag and trade, T. Higgins is the first one that kind of pops to mind, just to get a playmaking wide receiver. Sneed, I think, Christian Wilkins coming out of Miami is kind of the first one I thought of, just another kind of brand name defender, because the offense is going to need a lot of work, but if the defense can add another kind of gravity player, as I know you've called them a lot, something like that, that'd be great. Offensively, I think, it'd be great to go out and get a tackle, a guard, anyone that is, you can confidently project to play 16 good games, 17 good games along the offensive line, and not have a rotating cast of characters. Those are probably my big ones, but anyone that I guess is better than the average player on the roster right now would be a value add. So
sounds totally reasonable to me. I seem like a little hesitant, like, hey, Christian, will you come on down? Show them the money. They've got the cash they need to spend. I've been beating this into the ground as recently on TV last night. They have to spend. And so look, if they get Christian Wilkins, I think the initial reaction will be like, oh my God, you're spending in a defensive tackle, and why are you giving all the money? Where's the receiver? Where's the offensive tackle? Like, get the game wreckers, the impact players, whatever term you want. I don't think that's a crazy ask. All right, he's been Joe Ascioti here in the second edition of the fan segment. Well done, sir. Thank you for listening and for donating. We usually ask guests if there's anything they want to promote. I don't know if that falls anywhere near your current line of work. You're just good. You want to stay and live a private life?
Yeah, nothing to promote here. Just thanks for having me on, Andrew, and thanks for supporting the Boston Children's and doing what you're doing. So really appreciate it, and looking forward to reading what you guys got for the rest of the off season and going into the year. So thanks again.
Thank you, Joe.